Trapped in an elevator for 7 hours, I lost consciousness from hypoxia while protecting my 6-month-old unborn baby with my life. When the doors finally pried open, my husband, a lieutenant in the fire department, scooped his terrified ex-girlfriend into his arms and carried her out first. Shortly after, when a young firefighter handed him my wedding ring with a final message from me, he collapsed to the floor. The instant they forced the elevator doors open, I was already starved of oxygen. I could barely hear a thing, but my hands remained desperately clamped over my pregnant belly. When Alex rushed in, I fully believed he would look for me first. Instead, he walked right past me and lifted Valerie, who was shivering and crying in a corner. "Valerie, it's okay, I'm here." His voice sounded desperate, hoarse, as if it were being ripped from his chest. I leaned my hand against the wall and tried to call out his name, but only a freezing breath escaped my throat. We were trapped in that elevator for 7 hours from 2:00 p.m. to 9:00 p.m. At first, it was just a localized power outage in a massive downtown Chicago department store, but then the emergency backup generator failed. There were 8 of us in total, an elderly man, a little boy, 2 young women, a delivery guy, Valerie, and me. I was pregnant, but I was also the only person in there with first aid knowledge from my past as an ER nurse. I reorganized everyone's positions. I put the elderly man near the crack of the door. I sat the little boy in the back. I asked the young women to take turns fanning the air, and the delivery guy used his phone's flashlight. I tore pages from a small notepad I carried in my purse and jotted down everyone's symptoms and the time. Valerie was quiet at first. She sat pale beside me, her fingers trembling nonstop. She said she was terrified of the dark. She said she couldn't breathe. And then she whispered, "I wish Alex were here." I didn't respond to that last part. I just handed her half of my water bottle. Later, the ventilation worsened drastically. The little boy was crying inconsolably, and the elderly man started complaining of chest pain. I asked everyone to stop talking to conserve energy, but suddenly Valerie started screaming, "I don't want to die in here. Lucy, you're a nurse. Do something." Holding my belly, I stood up and pressed the already broken emergency button until my fingers went numb, but there was no answer. I dropped back to my knees and pounded on the elevator doors with all my strength, banging out an SOS rhythm. My baby kicked sharply. I bowed my head, hugged my stomach, and whispered, "Hold on a little longer, my love." At that moment, I still believed Alex would come for me. He was a rescue unit lieutenant. No one knew better than him that I was pregnant, and no one knew better than him how terrified I was that something might happen to our child. At the 6-hour mark, Valerie suddenly lunged at me and grabbed my wrists. Her nails dug into my skin. "Lucy, I swear I can't breathe. Give me your spot near the door." Near the door was a small gap. It was the space I had left open for the old man and the little boy. "Sit down and stop wasting oxygen. We're all having a hard time," I told her. She cried even louder. "You hate me because I came back into Alex's life, don't you? Do you want to see me die?" Everyone in the elevator looked at me. I didn't defend myself. I simply pried her hands off me little by little. I draped my jacket over the boy's back and moved the old man a bit closer to the gap. "Valerie, if you have the energy to cry right now, it means you're not the one in the worst shape. The old man's lips are turning blue and the kid won't stop sweating. They need the air more than you." She was left speechless. A second later, she clutched her chest and collapsed onto the floor. By then, my own vision was blurring. I knew half of her fainting spell was genuine panic, but the other half was pure theater to force me to yield. However, I couldn't take any chances. With the help of Tyler, the delivery guy, we laid her flat. I checked her breathing and dug through her purse for her medication. The bottle said it was for anxiety. It wasn't a rescue inhaler for asthma. I put the pills back. "If it's not asthma, don't scream again. Don't scare the others," I told her in a low voice. She glared at me, her eyes brimming with tears, and the hatred in her look was unmistakable. By the 7th hour, a ringing started in my ears. My baby's movements were getting weaker and weaker. I gathered my last ounce of strength and wrote down everyone's condition in the notepad. Elderly man, hypoxia. Boy, high temp. Valerie, panic state. Delivery guy, scratches on arm. Pregnant woman Lucy Miller, decreased fetal movement. After writing the last line, I slipped off my wedding ring. Alex had put that ring on my finger with his own hands. On the day we got married, he told me, "Lucy, I go on a lot of calls. I might not always be home, but I promise you one thing. Whenever you need me, I'll be the first one running toward you." Back then, I believed him right up until I was 6 months pregnant. He missed 3 ultrasounds, and I made up excuses for him. When Valerie moved back to the States from London and he went to pick her up at the airport in the middle of the night, I convinced myself they were just old friends. Even today, trapped in this elevator, my first instinct was to tell myself he would come to save me. But when the doors opened, he took Valerie in his arms and walked away. He didn't even look at me. A blinding light poured in from the outside. Paramedics rushed in with stretchers and oxygen tanks. I saw Alex running away. Valerie had her arms wrapped around his neck, her face buried in his shoulder. She looked back at me. Her gaze was light, almost victorious. I felt my mind go blank, and the ring nearly slipped from my fingers. Mark, a young firefighter, dropped to his knees in front of me. Ma'am, are you okay?" I looked at him and slowly pressed the ring into his palm. "Give this to Alex." Mark was stunned. I scraped together my last remaining breath and said, "Tell him. My baby and I won't be waiting for him anymore." After those words, I collapsed backward. When I woke up, I was in the ICU. I had oxygen tubes in my nose, an IV in the back of my hand, and fetal monitors strapped around my belly, emitting a steady sequence of beeps. A doctor stood by the bed with a grim expression. The prolonged hypoxia caused abnormalities in the fetal heart rate. "We're stabilizing the baby first and keeping you under strict observation. Where is your family?" "Your husband went to the trauma ward with another patient and hasn't returned." The doctor fell silent. I closed my eyes. Not out of pain, but because in that moment, everything felt absurdly ridiculous. I had been married to Alex for 3 years. I knew his job was dangerous, that he could be called out at any second, and that he carried an old wound in his heart named Valerie. For him, I took care of his demanding mother. For him, I managed the phone tree for the squad's families. Since getting pregnant, I went to my checkups alone, waited in line alone, paid the bills alone, and drove home alone, dragging my aching back. I thought marriage was about mutual understanding. But the reward for all my understanding was him deciding he never needed to put me first. Half an hour later, I heard rushed footsteps outside my room. Alex had finally returned. His voice sounded strained. "Where's Mark?" He was on guard duty at the door. Mark didn't answer immediately. I heard the faint clink of a metal object dropping into a palm. "It was the sound of my marriage ending," Lieutenant Mark said. "Your wife asked me to give you this." Alex's breathing hitched. Mark continued. "She said she and your child won't be waiting for you anymore." A deathly silence hung on the other side of the door. A second later, Alex's voice completely broke. "Where is she? Where is Lucy? How is she?" I opened my eyes and stared at the glaring white ceiling lights. A nurse peeked in to ask if I wanted to let him in. I slowly shook my head. "I don't want to see him." The nurse nodded and shut the door. The moment it clicked closed, I heard Alex shouting my name from the hallway. I didn't answer. I placed my hands over my belly, where a weak but steady pulse still beat, and spoke to my baby. "Starting today, Mommy is going to stop waiting for him." Alex stood outside the hospital room all night. The nurse told me that when she went out to change my IV bag, he hadn't sat down or drank any water. He just stared down the hallway. "Your husband seems very worried about you." I brushed off the comment. Concern that arrives too late is like expired medicine. No matter how much you take it, won't save a life. At 7:00 a.m., the doctor came in for rounds. He frowned as he reviewed my chart. "Last night, the fetal heart rate fluctuated dangerously. Luckily, the emergency response got to you in time, but now you need absolute bed rest. 0 emotional triggers." I nodded. The doctor glanced at me and softened his tone. "As a former ER nurse, you know the risks of hypoxia during pregnancy. Don't push yourself like that again." I managed a tired smile. If I hadn't pushed myself, the old man and the little boy with me wouldn't have made it until the doors opened. The doctor stayed quiet. He scribbled some notes on my chart. "Ensure fetal well-being. Observation. Avoid stress." When the nurse brought me water, there were 3 knocks on the door. It was a soft, familiar rhythm. "Lucy, it's me," Alex said from the hallway. My fingers froze. The nurse looked at me and I said, "Don't open it." There were a few seconds of silence outside. Then Alex spoke again. "I know you're awake. I just want to see your face. And the babies." I looked at the erratic graph on the fetal monitor next to my bed. Those jagged lines were like the life force I had slowly drained away last night in the elevator. I raised my voice. "Alex, if you're so desperate to see me right now, it must mean you've already made sure Valerie is perfectly fine." No sound came from the other side of the door. I knew my words had hit a nerve. Finally, Alex said Valerie was terrified. "She has PTSD. I was afraid she was going to have a secondary panic attack." I turned my face toward the cold door. "So my 6-month pregnancy wasn't as important as her getting a scare." His voice sounded desperate. "It's not that, Lucy. Please calm down." When I got into the elevator, the first thing I saw was her on the floor screaming my name. "I thought you could hold out longer. You're an ER nurse. You're stronger than she is." That sentence made me laugh, even though laughing hurt my chest. So that was it. Being strong wasn't a reason to be cared for. It was the perfect excuse to be left for last. Alex, I said, I am not the last rescue supply on your priority list, nor am I a tool for you to decide who to save first. I am your wife, and the mother of your child. A dull thud echoed from the hallway as if he had leaned heavily against the wall. It was my fault. Let me in. Let me explain it to you in person. I closed my eyes. Save your explanations for the official incident report and your apologies for yourself. I don't want to see you. Another long silence. Suddenly, the doorknob turned from the outside, but the nurse immediately blocked it. Sir, the patient is refusing visitors. You cannot force your way in. Alex let go of the knob, but his voice grew darker. Lucy, do not use our child to threaten me. My eyes snapped open. Last night, when I was pounding on the elevator door, holding my stomach, where was he when my baby stopped moving and I passed out from lack of oxygen? Who was he carrying in his arms, and now standing outside my door he dared to say I was, using my child to threaten him? I sat up, gripping the edge of the bed. The nurse tried to stop me, but I grabbed my phone and dialed Sarah, my college roommate and a divorce attorney. She answered with a groggy voice. Lucy, what's going on so early? You didn't have a checkup today. Sarah, I need you to draw up divorce papers. Where are you? In the fetal care unit at Chicago Med. Alex is right outside the door. Sarah paused for a second and said, I'm on my way. Don't sign anything. Keep all the medical reports, bills, and records of the incident. And do not be alone with him. I hung up. Alex on the other side of the door had clearly heard everything. His voice was frantic. Lucy, are you serious? Last night when those elevator doors opened, you were dead serious too, weren't you? That sentence seemed to choke him. He didn't speak again for a long time. At 10:00 a.m., Valerie arrived. I heard her crying softly in the hallway. Alex, this is all my fault. Lucy must be furious with me. If I hadn't panicked so badly, you wouldn't have pulled me out first. It's not your fault, he said. How many times had I heard that exact phrase? The day Valerie moved back to the States, she called him at 11:00 p.m., crying because the airline lost her luggage and she was scared to be alone at O'Hare. He abandoned the homemade chicken noodle soup my mom had dropped off for my nausea and drove straight to the airport. When I asked why he didn't just tell her to go to airport security or customer service, he replied, It's not her fault. She's been living abroad for years and feels insecure. When Valerie had a stomachache, he missed my first 4D ultrasound. When he got home and I showed him the sonogram, he cut me off. Be understanding, Lucy. It was an emergency. It's not her fault. When Valerie rented an apartment in our neighborhood, he hung her curtains, fixed her plumbing, and brought her medicine. When I told him she was relying on him too much, he said, Lucy, it's not her fault. I owe her my life. That supposed life debt was an invisible noose that had choked my marriage for 3 years. But I wasn't going to let it suffocate me anymore. There was another knock on the door. This time it was Valerie. Her voice was thin and shaky. Lucy, can I come see you? Before I could answer, she had already pushed the door open. Alex walked in behind her, frowning, but he didn't stop her. When the nurse tried to kick her out, Valerie started crying, her eyes bloodshot. She was wearing hospital scrubs and had a single small bandage on her forehead. Even though she'd only suffered a minor scratch last night, she looked like she'd just survived a war zone. She stood at the foot of my bed, wringing her hands. I really didn't do it on purpose. I didn't ask him to get me out first. I was just so scared I thought I was dying. I stared at her coldly. Didn't the doctor tell you before you walked in here that I can't be exposed to emotional triggers? Valerie rushed to say. He's just worried about you. I laughed. Oh, so because he's worried about me, he breaks into the high-risk fetal care unit without permission. And because you're also so worried about me, you tagged along? Alex's face paled. Lucy, you don't have to speak to her like that. I pointed to my medical chart on the nightstand. And how should I speak to her? Should I tell her not to worry, that I totally understand that her little scare is way more important than my baby's life? He reached out to touch the medical chart, but before he could, I swatted his hand away. Don't touch that. You no longer have the right to sign or review my medical documents. Alex's hand froze in midair. Valerie's tears spilled over. I know you've hated me since I got back from London. If my being here bothers you so much, I'll leave. I nodded. Yes. Leave right now. She hadn't expected such a blunt answer. She stood frozen tears halfway down her cheeks, not knowing what to do. Alex furrowed his brow. Lucy. I pressed the call button. When the nurse rushed in, I said, Please, remove these people. They have nothing to do with me, and I need to rest. The nurse glared at Alex, then at Valerie. The patient is on strict bed rest. Please leave. Alex didn't move. His eyes were fixed on my hand. It was bare. Only a faint indentation of the ring remained on my ring finger. Suddenly, he asked in a hoarse voice, "Where is the ring? You got it back, didn't you?" His Adam's apple bobbed. "I will not accept a divorce." I looked him dead in the eye and enunciated every word with absolute clarity. "Alex, I don't need you to accept the divorce, just like I didn't need your permission to take the ring off." Just then, I heard rushed footsteps and commotion approaching. I thought it was Sarah, but the person who barged in was Brenda, my mother-in-law. The moment she entered, she slammed her designer purse onto the table. "That is enough, Lucy." Valerie was so terrified she couldn't sleep all night after getting out of that elevator. And instead of comforting her, "You're making a fool out of my son, you are still a Davis." I leaned back against the pillow and slowly looked up. So the second act of the heroic rescue had begun. Brenda marched in with the attitude of a prosecutor interrogating a criminal. She wore a pristine purple pantsuit, her hair perfectly hairsprayed, and on her wrist was the $2 514K gold tennis bracelet I had bought her last year. Back then, she complained the design was a bit outdated, but in the family group chat, she bragged that Valerie really has great taste. The platinum necklace she gave me makes me look 10 years younger. I hadn't cared because she was Alex's mother. But now, standing by my hospital bed, her first words weren't to ask about my health or her grandchild's. She said, "If you apologize to Valerie, we'll sweep this whole thing under the rug." I stared at her. "Me, apologize to who? To Valerie, obviously," she replied as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "The poor girl was locked in an elevator and practically scared to death. And you, using your pregnancy as an excuse, are giving us all attitude. Alex is a firefighter. Who he saves first is a professional decision. Stop stressing him out with your marital drama." I let out a harsh laugh. Does Brenda know how dangerously low her grandson's heart rate dropped last night? "But the baby is fine, right?" That simple sentence made the entire room fall dead silent. Suddenly, I understood everything. In their eyes, as long as I was still breathing and the baby hadn't died, nothing they did to me was an injustice. But Valerie shedding 3 tears was a national tragedy. Alex seemed to realize how cruel those words sounded. He muttered, "Mom, don't talk like that." "What did I say wrong?" Brenda glared at him. "Look at her throwing the word divorce around at the drop of a hat. She thinks she's the only woman in the world who's ever been pregnant. I was working on her grandfather's farm when I was pregnant with you." I slowly sat up. The nurse tried to help me, but I held up a hand to stop her. "Brenda, working on a farm while pregnant was your choice. Me being on strict bed rest right now so my baby doesn't die is a medical order. If you think the doctors are exaggerating, go take it up with the OBGYN department." Brenda's face turned red. "Lucy, what a complete lack of respect for your elders. And speaking of adult responsibilities," I grabbed my phone from the nightstand and opened my banking app. "Since we're all here, let's settle the accounts once and for all." "Lucy, don't talk about money at a time like this," Alex frowned immediately. I glared at him. "And when should I talk about it? Should I wait until I'm in an operating room to be told that we're family and shouldn't be petty?" Hearing the word money, Brenda's eyes showed a flash of panic. I tapped on the first transaction. March of last year, Brenda said her back hurt and wanted to go to a private physical therapy clinic. I paid $600 for 12 sessions. June of last year, a donation for your brother's kid's private school fundraiser, $800. Brenda asked me to front it. October of last year, renovations at the Davis family cabin in Wisconsin. Since Alex was on shift, Brenda asked me to front $1,500 for the lumber. January of this year. Brenda didn't want to look cheap at the family dinner and made me book a fancy steakhouse. Between the deposit and the final bill, it was $400. With every number I read, Brenda's face grew paler. Alex, standing next to her, looked utterly confused. He didn't know, or rather, he never bothered to know. Every time his mother asked me for money, I kept it from him to avoid family drama. I thought if I gave my all one day, he would see it. Now I understood that someone who doesn't want to see you will simply ignore you. I turned the phone screen toward Brenda. In 3 years, it adds up to exactly $3,300. And that's not counting daily expenses, groceries, or the monthly allowance. Brenda swallowed hard. What are you implying? You're a daughter-in-law to the Davis family. It's your duty to take care of your in-laws. Sure, I said. But I don't want to anymore. Alex's expression crumbled. I didn't look at him. I went to the scheduled transfers page, and right in front of them canceled the $200 auto pay. I sent Brenda every month. Then I canceled the utility auto pays for the family cabin. When I was done, I tossed my phone onto the nightstand. From today on, manage the Davis family expenses yourselves. My money will go towards supporting me and my child. I no longer have a dime to spare for people who don't treat us like human beings. Brenda turned white with rage. How dare you? I looked her dead in the eye. I just did. Valerie suddenly leaned against the doorframe, murmuring, Alex, I'm dizzy. Almost on pure instinct, Alex reached out to support her. It was a movement so fast it was as if it were burned into his bones. Seeing that hand, whatever was left of my heart completely froze over. Right at that moment, Sarah walked in. She was wearing a sharp black trench coat and holding a manila envelope. Her gaze swept over everyone's faces before landing on me. Lucy. I brought the divorce papers. Alex shot her a ferocious glare. Sarah, stay out of our family business. Sarah smiled coldly. Mr. Davis, I am the legal counsel representing Miss Lucy Miller. I advise you to watch your words. I am documenting everything. Brenda slapped the table indignantly. A lawyer, Lucy, are you seriously going to divorce him? You are carrying a Davis heir. Where are you going to go if you divorce him? I reached out and took the envelope. The child is mine. And where I go is none of your business. Alex took a step forward, lowering his voice. Lucy, are you really going to push this to the extreme? I looked up at him. Alex, weren't you the one who pushed us to this extreme the second you scooped Valerie into your arms and walked away? Valerie sobbed. Lucy, you think I stole Alex from you, don't you? But I swear it's not like that. In the elevator, I just wanted to help you, but you were the one who wouldn't let me near the air vent saying I wasn't really sick. I stared at her. Do you really want to talk about what happened in the elevator right now? She was left speechless for a second. Alex frowned. What do you mean? Before I could answer, Mark's voice echoed from the doorway. Lieutenant Davis, we have the formal statements from the other civilians trapped in the elevator. Mark was holding a thin clipboard. Noticing the tension in the room, he stopped dead in his tracks. Brenda was the first to jump on it. Perfect. Let's all hear it. Let's hear what kind of drama Lucy stirred up in there. Mark's expression was complicated. He looked at me first. I nodded. Read it. Valerie's face instantly dropped. She reached out and tugged on Alex's sleeve. Alex, I don't feel well. Let's go. He didn't move. Mark flipped open the first page. Statement from Claire, mother of the minor trapped. Throughout the entire ordeal, Lucy Miller maintained order and gave up the only ventilated space to my son and an elderly man. Valerie demanded her spot several times, screaming, and even shoved Lucy by the arm. Valerie turned as white as a sheet. Mark continued. Statement from Tyler, delivery driver, around the 6th hour. Valerie claimed to be having an asthma attack, but there was no rescue inhaler in her bag, only anti-anxiety meds. When Lucy asked her to stop screaming so she wouldn't use up all the oxygen, Valerie accused Lucy of trying to murder her. The silence in the room was absolute. Brenda's hand remained frozen in the air. Alex turned very, very slowly toward Valerie. You shoved Lucy in the elevator. Valerie's lips trembled. It wasn't on purpose. I was just so scared. And you see, I said calmly, it's not her fault. Alex's face drained of even more color. Mark closed the clipboard, lowering his voice slightly. There's another report, Lieutenant. Internal Affairs requires you to report to the firehouse at 1,500 hours to explain the protocols followed at the scene. Was there a problem with the protocol? Alex frowned. Mark glanced at me, then looked down. From the moment you carried Valerie out until the EMS team made contact with your wife, 3 minutes and 20 seconds of a care vacuum elapsed. By then, she had lost consciousness, and there was fetal distress. 3 minutes and 20 seconds. It's a short amount of time. Barely enough to listen to a pop song. But inside an elevator with no oxygen, those 3 minutes and 20 seconds were enough to drag my baby toward death's door. Alex's shoulders went rigid. I stared at him. Do you still think I'm just stirring up drama? He didn't answer. His hands were gripping my wedding ring so tightly, his knuckles were bone white. I knew those hands well. Those hands knew how to untie rescue ropes, carry stretchers, and pull victims from the rubble with extreme care. But last night, those same hands walked right past me and lifted Valerie. Alex murmured, Lucy. I swear I didn't know you were in such critical condition. I looked into his eyes. You didn't know because you didn't even look at me. That sentence was more devastating than any accusation. He stood petrified. Valerie shook her head, crying. Alex, don't believe them. They're all taking her side just because she's pregnant. I really felt like I was choking. Valerie. Mark frowned. These statements aren't just from one person. Every single rescued civilian gave their testimony separately, and they all corroborate each other. Valerie's eyes grew even redder. Mark, you're attacking me too. I know you admire Lucy a lot, but I was a victim too. She was incredibly cunning. With a single sentence, she repositioned herself as the victim. Before, I always thought maybe she was just overly fragile, relying on Alex purely out of insecurity. But last night in the elevator, I saw it clearly for the first time. Her fragility was selective. If there was an old man and a kid, she didn't care about anyone else. If there was a firefighter, she trembled. If Alex was there, she fainted. Sarah stepped up to my bed and placed the envelope on the nightstand. Lucy, in your current condition, it is not healthy to keep tolerating this circus. I suggest you ask them to leave. I nodded. Brenda looked like she wanted to say something else, but Sarah leveled a cold glare at her. Ma'am, the patient requires absolute bed rest. If you continue to disturb the peace in this room, I will have hospital security remove you. Brenda trembled. Are you threatening me? It's not a threat, Sarah replied flatly. It's formal notice. 2 nurses were already hovering by the door watching the scene. Brenda didn't have the courage to cause a bigger scene, so she settled for shooting me a venomous look. Lucy, you're going to regret this. Life as a divorced mother with a kid is hell. If I don't divorce him now, the hell will swallow my child and me whole, I replied calmly. This time Brenda had no comeback. Mark called Alex, reminding him he needed to return to the station for the debriefing. Before leaving, Alex stood in the doorway staring at me for a long time. Lucy, we'll talk when I get back. I closed my eyes. There's nothing to talk about. We'll speak through the divorce settlement. When the door finally closed, my back, which had been rigid the entire time, slumped against the bed. Sarah supported my shoulders. Does it hurt? No, I shook my head. I'm just exhausted. She handed me a cup of warm water. You should have reached your breaking point a long time ago. I smiled weakly, but tears suddenly began to fall. I wasn't crying because I missed Alex. I was crying because I pitied the Lucy from last night. In reality, the 7 hours I was trapped in that elevator didn't start when the power went out. They started the day Valerie returned to the US. That day, Alex was supposed to come with me for an ultrasound at the maternity clinic. While we were in the waiting room, his phone rang. Seeing the caller ID, his expression shifted. Who is it? I asked. Valerie, he said. I knew who Valerie was, his unforgettable first love. They grew up together. 10 years ago, they were trapped under the rubble of a collapsed building during severe flash floods in the Midwest. Alex always told the story in the most critical moment. Valerie held his hand and begged him not to fall asleep. He had remembered that life debt for a decade. Valerie eventually moved to London, and he was brooding for a long time. When I met him, he was already the most stoic, rational man in the rescue unit. He rarely spoke of the past, but when he drank too much, he would murmur Valerie's name. I knew this, but back then, I thought the past was just the past. I thought if a man wanted to marry you and have kids with you, it meant he had chosen the present. It took me a long time to understand that for some men, marriage isn't waking up from a dream. It's just finding an understanding woman to keep their life organized. That day, Valerie was crying on the phone saying she was lost at O'Hare and didn't have her luggage. Alex jumped out of his seat. I had our queue ticket in my hand. We're up next, I told him. He replied, Lucy. Valerie just landed and doesn't know anyone here anymore. Go to the appointment. I'll be right back. He never came back. The ultrasound tech printed the first clear picture of my baby's little face. I sat alone in the hallway staring at that tiny hand on the glossy paper. I texted him and he replied, Valerie is really shaken up. I'll be home later. Since then, his I'll be home later multiplied. When Valerie was apartment hunting, he came home later. When Valerie was sick, he came home later. When Valerie couldn't find a job, he came home later. When I was throwing up bile from morning sickness, he told me rescue drills were just really grueling right now. When I got leg cramps in the middle of the night, he said Valerie was having night terrors and couldn't sleep alone. I never threw a massive fit. I simply wrote down every detail, not to keep score, but because the midwife at the birthing center asked me to keep an emotional and family support journal. She said pregnancy shouldn't be endured in isolation. Partner support is fundamental. I kept that journal from month 1 to month 6. Alex missed 12 medical appointments. Valerie's name appeared in it 17 times. Now that notebook I hated looking at had become my most useful piece of evidence. When Sarah flipped through the journal, her frown deepened. It's unbelievable what you've put up with. I leaned back, my voice weak. I always thought that because he's a firefighter, saving people is his duty. I didn't want to compete with someone who genuinely needed help. But Valerie wasn't always in danger. She just constantly put herself in situations where he had to save her. I didn't say anything else because it was the absolute truth. That afternoon, Mark sent me a text. He said the inquiry confirmed a severe protocol failure at the scene. Alex, as the incident commander, failed to perform basic medical triage and extracted Valerie first, causing a critical delay. Mark also told me that Alex was completely silent during the meeting. And when they released the statements from the trapped civilians, he suddenly asked, "Did Lucy ever call out for me from inside?" Mark said no one answered him in the room because the transcripts showed I never said his name once. I yelled for them to get the old man out first. I yelled for them to give the boy water. I yelled for people not to push because there was no air. But I never called for my husband because I firmly believed that the second he saw me, he would run to me. At 8:00 p.m., Alex returned to the hospital. This time, he didn't knock on the door. He stood outside, looking at me through the glass. I looked back. He seemed to have aged a decade in a day. He had dark, sunken bags under his eyes, which were bloodshot. My phone vibrated. It was a text from him, Lucy. I read all the reports. "I'm sorry." I stared at those 2 words and turned off my phone. An "I'm sorry" said before a tragedy occurs is human. But an "I'm sorry" said after destroying someone is just a useless echo that fixes nothing. I was hospitalized for 5 days. During those 5 days, Alex came every single day. Sometimes he brought soup, sometimes fruit, sometimes baby clothes. Everything was left with the nurses. He didn't leave. He just sat on the benches in the hallway. At night when I went for tests, I would see him in the distance, head bowed, clutching our wedding ring. I won't lie and say I didn't feel a pang of pain. After all, I had loved him. I loved him so much. I took care of his mother like she was my own. So much that I sent out updates to the squad families, even during the worst days of my pregnancy. So much that if I heard he got hurt on a call, I would run out of the house in my slippers to wait for him at the firehouse. But love is not an invincible life raft. I couldn't risk my life for him ever again. On the 5th day, the doctor discharged me for bed rest at home, warning me again to avoid fatigue and emotional distress at all costs. Alex found out immediately. He assumed I would return to our house. He even deep-cleaned it. I knew because the building superintendent called me asking if Alex knew how to assemble a crib or if the smell of bleach would bother a pregnant woman. I just told him, I'm not going back there. On the day of my discharge, Sarah came to pick me up in her compact car. She had put soft cushions in the back seat. Before I got in, Alex came running from the other side of the parking garage. Lucy. He was holding a brown paper bag. Inside were ginger snaps from my favorite bakery, the only thing I could stomach during my first trimester nausea. He had finally remembered. It was a pity that leaning against the car door I didn't even glance at the bag. "What do you want?" Alex Sarah asked. He stopped in front of me and swallowed hard. "I know you don't want to come home. I'll leave. You go live there. It's close to the hospital and you have everything you need." "That's not necessary," I said. "I've already rented an apartment." Panic flashed in his eyes. "You rented an apartment. You're pregnant. You shouldn't be moving around. You have me worried sick." I smiled faintly. "Alex, doesn't it seem ridiculous that you're worried about me now?" His face drained of color. "Beside me," Sarah warned coldly. "Mr. Davis, Lucy cannot stand for long periods." Alex took a deep breath. "Okay, don't get stressed. Just give me the address. I just want to take care of you. I promise I won't bother you." I shook my head. "Not necessary." He started to lose his composure. "Lucy, you can't just cut me out of your life like this. I am the father of that child." I stared hard at him. "You are the father, and that is exactly why your duty is to respect the medical needs and mental peace of the mother, not harass me in a hospital parking garage." He was stunned. I continued. "First, do not come to see me privately. Communicate through my lawyer. Second, do not ever bring Valerie around me again. And third, keep your mother away from me. And if I do all that," Alex's voice broke, "would you consider not divorcing me?" No. I didn't hesitate for a second. Something shattered deep in his eyes. Why, I looked at the bag of ginger snaps in his hand. Because I just don't have a taste for them anymore. The sentence was delivered lightly, but to him, it sounded like the worst form of cruelty. He lowered his head, stared at the bag, and slowly clenched his fists. I got into the car. Before I closed the door, he suddenly held out the wedding ring to me. "Lucy, you hold on to this. When you're calmer, we'll talk." I didn't take it. Sarah spoke for me. "Mr. Davis, Miss Miller returned the ring to you voluntarily. There is no concept of holding on to it. Do whatever you want with it. Throw it away if you want, but don't try to chain her with it." The car door shut and we drove out of the parking garage. Through the rearview mirror, I saw Alex standing motionless, the bag dangling limply from his hand. I didn't look back again. The rented apartment was 2 blocks from the hospital. It was small, but very bright. Sarah helped me bring my things up and taped my medication schedule to the fridge. "I'll come check on you once a day." Starting tomorrow, Martha will come help you around the house. She took care of my aunt and is totally trustworthy, Sarah said. I nodded and thanked her. Sarah sat next to me with a rare expression of utter seriousness. Lucy, are you absolutely sure a divorce while pregnant is incredibly tough? Not just the paperwork, but the people. Alex will regret this and won't leave you alone. Your mother-in-law will throw a fit. Valerie will play the victim and everyone will tell you to forgive him. I touched my belly. I'm sure. How are you so sure? I stayed quiet for a moment, then said, Last night I had a nightmare. I dreamed I was still trapped in the elevator. The doors opened. Alex walked in, picked up Valerie, and left. And it kept happening over and over again. I screamed from the back until I lost my voice, but he never heard me. My baby's kicks faded away little by little. When I woke up, I was drenched in sweat. In that exact second, I knew there's no going back. A house that gives a pregnant woman nightmares is not a home. That same night, Alex went back to our old house. He sent me dozens of photos, the spotless living room, the assembled crib, pregnancy cookbooks in the kitchen corner, protectors on the furniture. He texted Lucy, I was a disaster before. From now on, I'm going to learn. I looked at the photos for a long time. They didn't move me. They just made me feel pity. If all these things had appeared earlier, I might have cried tears of joy. Now, I just felt like a student trying to hand in an assignment when the semester was already over. Marriage isn't a test. A late assignment doesn't give you a passing grade. I didn't reply. At 1:30 p.m., Alex sent me a voice memo. His tone was incredibly low. Today when I got home, I realized for the first time that you had taken everything for the baby. The clothes, the little shoes, the medical files. You even took the papers off the fridge. He took a long pause. Lucy, this house suddenly feels so empty. I stopped the audio. The house didn't suddenly get empty. It had been emptying out little by little every single time he rushed out to save Valerie. The only difference was that now he had finally noticed. The next morning, Martha arrived. She was a woman in her 50s, very efficient, and a woman of few words. Seeing my pale face, the first thing she told me was, Miss your health and the baby come first here. Pay no mind to anything else. I smiled. How do you know there's anything else, Martha? Because you live alone and your eyes are completely bloodshot. She didn't pry any further, which I was infinitely grateful for. But the peace didn't last long. Around noon, the doorbell rang. Martha checked the peephole and frowned. There's an older woman and a young girl. I didn't even have to guess. Brenda and Valerie. I sat on the couch and rested a hand on my belly. Don't open it. From the hallway, Brenda's voice soon rang out. Lucy, I know you're in there. Don't hide. Who do you think you are? Making my grandchild live in some cheap rundown rental? Valerie spoke up softly. Mrs. Davis, don't get upset. Maybe Lucy is just confused right now. Brenda started pounding on the door. Confused. Alex is crawling on his knees. What more does she want? Is she trying to destroy the Davis family? Martha frowned. I'm calling the cops. Not yet, I said. I picked up my phone, opened the Ring doorbell app, and turned on the microphone. Brenda's face filled the screen. When she saw the camera light up, she yelled, Open the door, Lucy. The doctor put me on bed rest, I replied through the intercom. If you keep pounding on my door, I will call the building manager and the police. What are you talking about? Brenda was flabbergasted. Since when do you talk to me like that? Since I'm no longer part of your family. Brenda's face turned purple with rage. You are giving yourself way too much credit. I'm warning you, nobody wants to be saddled with a pregnant divorcee. No matter how big of a scene you make now, you'll end up coming back to Alex crying. Then pull up a chair and wait, I said, and cut the mic. The hallway was dead silent for a few seconds. Suddenly, Valerie started crying. Lucy, you hate me too, don't you? If you want to blame me, do it. But don't blame Alex. He's suffered enough these past few days. I tapped the intercom button again. Valerie. She looked at the camera. If you don't stop crying at my front door right now, I will print out the elevator incident reports and tape them to the lobby bulletin board so every neighbor in this building can read exactly how you stole the air from a pregnant woman. Her face completely transformed. Brenda also stood frozen. Besides, what you care about most in the world is what people think, right? So don't ever come back here. This time, the silence was absolute. Minutes later, they left. Martha looked at me and exclaimed, Lord have mercy, you've got a spine of steel, miss. I leaned back on the couch. I have to be strong, Martha. I don't have anyone standing behind me to protect me anymore. I have to be my own rescue squad. The day of the official fire department inquiry at the downtown headquarters, I didn't want to go. My OB had advised against going out, and Sarah told me a written statement was enough. However, I went not to watch Alex's humiliation, but to make the truth of those 7 hours undeniably clear. A failure in a rescue protocol couldn't be covered up with the excuse that she was just very scared. I couldn't allow the assumption that a pregnant woman's life could be pushed to the background just because someone else acted more fragile and vulnerable. The board met in a third-floor conference room. When I arrived, there were over a dozen people seated: the battalion chief, internal affairs investigators, CFD paramedics, firefighters from the squad, and the legal reps from the department store. Alex was seated in the front row on the left. Seeing me walk in, he sprang out of his chair like a coiled spring. "Lucy, what are you doing here?" The doctor said you needed bed rest. I ignored him and took a seat with Sarah's help. "I've come to give my statement as a victim." He was going to say something else, but the chief cleared his throat. "Lieutenant Davis, take your seat." Alex had no choice but to obey, but he couldn't take his eyes off me. I knew he was worried, but his worry felt as uncomfortable and absurd as wearing a jacket that was 3 sizes too small. The inquiry began. The timeline of the incident was projected on the screen. 1407, elevator failure. 1411, emergency call placed. 1540, backup generator failure. 1720, clear physical symptoms in occupants. 2052, doors breached. 2056, extraction of patient 1. The screen paused there. Patient 1, Valerie, female, minor contusions, acute panic attack. Patient 2, male child, elevated body temperature. Patient 3, elderly male, severe hypoxia. Patient 4, Lucy Miller, 24 weeks pregnant, loss of consciousness, fetal bradycardia. The room plunged into a deathly silence. The lead investigator spoke up. "Lieutenant Davis, as the incident commander of the primary response unit, why did you fail to execute a rapid medical triage of the victims?" Alex's Adam's apple bobbed. Lighting was poor at the time. Miss Valerie was collapsed near the doors, highly unstable. I assessed that she was suffering from an acute stress response. "Did you not notice that Mrs. Lucy Miller was unconscious?" the investigator asked. Alex took 2 seconds to answer. "No, I did not notice." "Were you aware that Mrs. Miller was pregnant?" This time the silence was even longer. "Yes, I was aware." The sound of pens scratching on notepads was so loud it felt like they were slapping him in the face. The CFD paramedic took the floor. "According to our unit's report, when we reached Mrs. Miller, she presented with critical oxygen desaturation and fetal distress. Fortunately, we acted quickly. Otherwise, the consequences would have been irreversible." Alex's spine stiffened. Sitting across from him, my hands were a little sweaty. Sarah squeezed my hand gently. I pulled out the notes I had torn from my notepad in the elevator. The paper was crumpled, and one corner still bore the crescent marks of Valerie's fingernails. I handed them to the investigators. "These are the vitals I logged inside the elevator. I recorded the clinical progression of the trapped civilians at regular intervals." The lead investigator took it, skimmed the pages, and his face grew severe. "Even in a state of hypoxia, you continued taking vitals. It's a habit from my ER days." "Amidst the chaos, a log saves lives," I answered. Someone sighed softly in the room. Alex looked down at the floor. Valerie was also there. She was sitting in the very back row, pale, looking particularly weak without Alex beside her. The investigators turned to her. "Miss Valerie, multiple testimonies confirm that you repeatedly demanded the pregnant woman surrender the ventilated space to you and that you even physically struggled with her. What do you have to say?" Valerie immediately started crying. "I was terrified. I don't remember anything." "Just because you don't remember doesn't mean it didn't happen," interrupted Tyler, the delivery guy from the elevator who had also been subpoenaed. "I saw the whole thing." She grabbed Lucy by the arm, demanding her spot. When Lucy told her the old man and the kid were doing worse, she started screaming that Lucy was trying to murder her. "Stop saying that," Valerie snapped. "I was trapped too. Is it a crime to be scared?" Tyler frowned. "Being scared isn't a crime. Shoving a pregnant woman is." Several pairs of eyes in the room locked onto Valerie, and they were no longer looks of pity but of judgment. Valerie couldn't take it anymore, and buried her face in her hands, sobbing. Before, if she cried, Alex would fly to her side. This time he didn't even flinch. His hands rested on his knees, gripping them so tightly his knuckles were white. The inquiry pushed forward. Mark spoke as the secondary responder. His voice was steady, but you could hear the suppressed anger. When I entered, Lieutenant Davis was already carrying Miss Valerie out. The elevator was completely dark and chaotic. Only when someone yelled that the pregnant woman had passed out did I notice Mrs. Miller collapsed in the back right corner. She still had the notepad in her hand. "When did she hand you her wedding ring?" the investigator asked. The room froze. Alex looked up sharply. Mark glanced at me and I nodded. Right before we loaded her onto the backboard, she pressed the ring into my hand. She was semi-conscious, but she spoke very clearly. The investigator asked no further questions, but Alex knew. I could see his eyes filling with tears. Before adjourning, the battalion chief announced the preliminary resolution. Alex was temporarily suspended from frontline command pending mandatory reevaluation and internal retraining. It wasn't the maximum penalty, but for Alex, it was total humiliation. He was the youngest lieutenant in the house, always praised for his cool head and professionalism, and this time, he had failed at the most basic foundational protocol. When the meeting ended, I stood up to leave. Alex followed me, but Sarah stepped in his path. He stopped, his eyes exhausted. "Lucy, I found out everything you did in there today." "You didn't find out today, Alex," I said. "You just never believed I was someone who could ever need help." He had no words. At that moment, a veteran firefighter stepped out of the conference room. Seeing Alex, he sighed and approached. "Alex, I've been meaning to tell you this regarding the flash flood collapse from 10 years ago. You've always been so deeply grateful to Valerie, but I think your memory is playing tricks on you." Alex turned sharply. "What are you talking about?" Valerie froze in her tracks. The veteran glanced at Valerie and said in a grave voice, "The girl who held your hand and kept you awake wasn't her. Valerie was just as terrified and in shock as you. It was another girl, a bystander, who helped you and then ran off to flag down the rescue teams. The reports got lost in the chaos, and when you woke up in the hospital, you only saw Valerie crying next to your bed and assumed it was her." Alex stood paralyzed. Every drop of blood drained from Valerie's face. I wasn't too surprised. A relationship built over 10 years on a fabricated life debt was bound to crumble sooner or later. Alex locked eyes with Valerie. "Is what he's saying true?" Valerie's lips trembled. "Alex, I was right next to you too. I didn't lie." But she couldn't finish. I didn't stick around to hear the rest. As Sarah helped me out of the building for the first time, I heard Alex shout in absolute fury. "Valerie, tell me the truth. What really happened?" The first thread had snapped our marriage. Now the second thread was severing the 10-year illusion between him and Valerie. After the inquiry, Alex disappeared for 2 days. He didn't text me, didn't come to the hospital, and didn't show up at my apartment. Sarah told me he was probably investigating the past. "Let him drown in it," she said. The truth was, I cared very little whether Valerie saved him or not. It didn't change my decision. Because even if she had truly saved his life, it wasn't an excuse to let his unborn child and me die. On the third day, Brenda called me. I didn't pick up. She sent a text. "Come to dinner on Saturday at the house. All your aunts, uncles, and cousins will be there. Don't embarrass us." I showed the text to Sarah, who laughed bitterly. "It's a snake pit," Sarah said. "Don't worry, it's fine," I replied, slipping the ledger into my purse. There was no point in hiding. If she loved seeking the family's opinion, let the family pass judgment. On Saturday night, the Davis family dining table was packed. The eldest aunt, the older cousin, the younger cousin, and distant relatives who usually only showed up at Thanksgiving were all there. When I walked in, every eye zeroed in on my belly. Brenda sat at the head of the table with a stern face. Alex was there too. Seeing me, he jumped up. "Lucy, you came." I ignored him and sat in the chair closest to the front door. Brenda frowned in disgust. "Why are you sitting so far away? Don't act all offended at a family dinner." "It's so I can leave faster," I replied. Silence fell over the table. Alex muttered, "Mom." But Brenda ignored him and cut to the chase. "I called everyone here today to clear the air. It's perfectly normal for a marriage to hit a few bumps. Alex is a firefighter. His duty is to save lives. If he pulled Valerie out first that day, it was a medical emergency, not because he was playing favorites." The eldest aunt immediately chimed in. "Exactly, Lucy. A man being dedicated to his job is a virtue. You're expecting his child. Don't go throwing tantrums and bringing up divorce at a time like this." The great-uncle added, "Besides, Valerie and Alex have known each other their whole lives. She's like his little sister. Don't be so jealous." I picked up a pitcher, poured myself a glass of water, and took a slow sip in no rush to respond. Seeing my silence, Brenda assumed I was cowed and raised her voice. "Lucy shows some maturity in front of the family. Drop this nonsense about a divorce, and you really ought to apologize to Valerie for treating her so horribly in the elevator." Alex's face completely changed. "Enough." Brenda slammed her hand on the table. "What do you mean, enough?" "She's carrying a Davis child in her belly. She needs to know how to behave. Look at her turning the house upside down these past few days. I set my water glass down. Are you all finished? Davis family? Brenda paled. I called them the Davis family because I had zero intention of pretending to be their daughter-in-law anymore. I pulled the ledger from my purse and dropped it onto the table with a heavy thud. Everyone flinched. I opened to the first page. Since all the relatives are here today, let's review the finances for the past 3 years. Brenda panicked instantly. Are you going to talk about money again, Lucy? Have you no shame? I have nothing to be ashamed of, I replied. It's far more shameful to demand apologies after leeching off me for years. The eldest aunt frowned. Lucy, that's no way to speak. Family helps family. Yes, which is why I've been helping for 3 years. I shoved the ledger to the center of the table. My mother-in-law's physical therapy, the nephew's private school fundraiser, renovations for the Wisconsin cabin, fancy family dinners, the loan for the cousin's car covering the aunt's bills when she was short at the end of the month. It's all written right here. The younger cousin turned pale. Lucy, why were you writing all this down? Because I stared right at him, I sweat for every single dime on that page by working my ass off. Alone. The table descended into a graveyard silence. I am 24 weeks pregnant. Alex has accompanied me to the doctor. Exactly. Twice. One time he left halfway through because Valerie called him, and the other time he dropped me off at the clinic door to go get Valerie because she had a stomachache. The other 12 times I went alone. Alex went as white as a ghost. I pulled out my pregnancy journal. Here is the log. The doctors constantly recommend the father be present. But Alex was too busy saving the world and babysitting Valerie. Brenda let out a screech. What's wrong with a man working hard? There's nothing wrong with working hard, I looked at her. There's not even anything wrong with taking care of an ex-girlfriend. What's wrong is demanding that I be understanding while using me as a free nanny and a personal ATM for the Davis family. The eldest aunt was struck mute. The younger cousin looked down at his phone. The relatives' gazes began to shift. They came here to watch me humiliate myself and beg for forgiveness, but they realized this wasn't a trial against me, it was an indictment against them. Desperate, Brenda yelled. Are you just saying all this so Alex will humiliate himself and beg for your forgiveness? He's already crawling on his knees. What more do you want? A divorce, I stated clearly. That word dropped like a boulder onto the table. Alex gripped the edge of the table with superhuman strength. Lucy, can we please talk alone? No. I met his eyes. For 3 years, I talked to you about everything alone, and the result was that you all thought I was an idiot you could walk all over. Right then, Valerie arrived. She opened the front door wearing a white sweater, her eyes red. I'm sorry, Mrs. Davis, I'm so late. Brenda looked at her like a life raft. Valerie, you're right on time. Tell everyone that on the day of the elevator incident, Alex saved you because it was an emergency, not because of favoritism. Valerie stood by the door and let a few tears fall. This is all my fault. If I didn't exist, Lucy and Alex wouldn't be like this. Really, I'll move away if I have to, as long as Lucy forgives him. The performance was flawless. She made it seem like she was yielding, but in reality, she was painting me as the villain who maliciously refused to forgive a repentant husband. Before I might have trembled with rage. Now I just felt extreme exhaustion. I picked up my phone and opened the official CFD incident report Mark had sent me. Valerie, do you really want to keep up this circus in front of all these people? Her face shifted slightly. I read the first paragraph out loud. Multiple victims confirmed that Valerie repeatedly demanded the ventilated spot and physically struggled with the pregnant woman Lucy Miller. Valerie's head snapped up. I read the second paragraph. Valerie claimed to be suffering an asthma attack, but medical evaluations confirmed she exhibited 0 signs of acute asthma. Third paragraph. Valerie's injuries consisted of superficial scratches that did not warrant a maximum priority medical evacuation. In the dining room, the only sound was the breathing of the guests. Brenda opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Valerie's tears dried instantly on her cheeks. I put my phone away and grabbed my purse. I won't be having dinner with you all tonight. I'll leave a copy of the ledger with Alex. It's not so you pay me back a single cent. It's to make it crystal clear that I owe the Davis family absolutely nothing. I turned to Alex. Once I considered you all my true family, but you mistook my efforts for obligation, my patience for weakness, and my child for a bargaining chip. Alex stood up, shaking. Lucy, I never thought. But you did it, I said. I turned toward the door. From behind, Brenda shrieked. If you walk out that door today, don't ever come back. I paused, but I didn't turn around. I hope so. Before the door swung shut, I heard a relative mutter, Hey, maybe we really did cross the line with her. It was a low whisper, but it sounded like a slap across Brenda's face. As I walked down to the street, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. It was an old photo of Alex and Valerie from 10 years ago standing in front of the flood rescue memorial. Valerie was leaning on his shoulder, smiling sweetly. Below was a text. "Lucy, you are not his first love. Don't try to compete because you'll lose." I looked at the photo and let out a laugh. I texted back, "I'm not competing. You can keep him." Valerie's provocation didn't cause me to lose any sleep. The one who truly couldn't sleep was Alex. Very early the next morning, he sent me a text. "Lucy, I looked into the flash flood. Valerie wasn't the one who saved me." I stared at the screen for a moment but didn't reply. Half an hour later, he sent an old photograph. It was from the rescue that year. Alex was on a stretcher, pale as a ghost. Valerie was next to him crying, but in the corner of the photo was another girl with a ponytail. I didn't know the girl. Alex texted, "A veteran firefighter tracked down the old logs. It was that girl with the ponytail who ran to get help. Valerie was trapped with me and couldn't do anything. For years, she let me believe I owed her my life." I turned my screen off. Sarah asked, "What's that about?" I showed her the phone. Sarah let out a mocking laugh. "A 10-year first love is like an all-you-can-eat buffet. They just grab whatever they want and claim it as theirs." What a piece of work. "But you don't care about this anymore, right?" Sarah asked. "I don't care," I said. Though I quickly corrected myself. I care a little. I feel angry for the Lucy of the past. If Alex only felt gratitude toward her, I could have understood. But it turns out that gratitude was a fraud. It destroyed our marriage, made him miss ultrasounds, and left me for dead in an elevator over a debt of honor that didn't even exist. It's so ridiculous, I don't know who to hate more. At noon, Alex arrived. He didn't come up to the apartment. He texted me from the street. "I'm not coming up. I just want to tell you what happened back then." I had no desire to see him, but some knots need to be untied before you can throw them in the trash forever. I went down to the lobby, accompanied by Martha. In the building's courtyard, Alex was sitting on a bench. He was gaunt, unshaven, and there was no trace left of the stoic, perfect Lieutenant Davis. Seeing me, he sprang to his feet. "Lucy." I ignored his outstretched hand and sat down opposite him. Martha stood a few yards away. Alex looked at her and smiled bitterly. "You can't even stand to be alone with me anymore." "No," I replied. Pain flashed across his eyes. "Lucy, when I woke up after that collapse, Valerie was crying next to me. She said she held my hand and didn't let me sleep. I thought she saved me. When she moved to London, I felt I owed her my entire life." I listened in silence. He continued. "These past few days, I contacted the rescue crews from that year and we tracked down the other girl. She told me she was walking by, heard yelling, and ran to flag down help. She didn't want any press, so she didn't leave her details. And Valerie knew I asked." He closed his eyes. "She knew. She admitted it. She said she didn't correct me because she was afraid I'd stop paying attention to her. I wasn't surprised. Valerie always knew exactly what Alex's weak point was, the debt, the fragility, the memory of the past. She played those cards perfectly." Alex looked at me, his eyes welling up. "Lucy, I made an unforgivable mistake. I confused guilt with responsibility. I thought because you were always so reasonable, you would always hold out. I thought because you were strong, you could wait. I forgot that pregnant women get scared too." "You didn't forget," I said. "You just never even stopped to think about it." That sentence made him shudder. "Yes. I didn't even think about it." He pulled our wedding ring from his pocket, perfectly polished. "I've been thinking, it must have hurt you so much." I looked at the ring. "No." He froze. "It hurt when I was choking in the elevator and couldn't scream," I said. When I took the ring off, I felt a massive wave of relief. Alex's eyes instantly turned bloodshot. "Lucy, please don't say that." "What do you want me to say? Do you want me to cry? To scream? To wait eternally for you to choose between Valerie and me? I don't want you to choose anything anymore." But I don't choose her anymore. But I don't choose you anymore." I finished his sentence. A breeze swept through the courtyard, kicking up dry leaves. Alex lowered his head. The ring in his hand seemed to burn him. He murmured, "Can we wait until the baby is born to talk about the divorce?" "No," I said. He looked up sharply. "Why? You're too weak right now." "The divorce will only give you more stress. I'll move out. I'll forward you my entire paycheck. I'll make Valerie come beg for your forgiveness on her knees. I'll do whatever you ask." "Alex, you still don't get it. I'm not negotiating terms with you. I pronounced every syllable with total icy clarity. It's just that I don't need you anymore." Saying that I didn't feel the tremor I expected. I only felt a peace that had arrived far too late. Alex went pale. He seemed to want to grasp at a burning nail. The child. Don't you want the child to grow up in a complete family? I prefer her to grow up in a safe family rather than a complete one. I rubbed my belly. That is much more important. Just then, my phone rang. It was Nancy, my coworker from the maternity clinic. Her voice was frantic. Lucy Valerie is here at the clinic. She's looking for you. She's crying outside the conference room saying you ruined her life. There are a ton of pregnant women watching. Alex's face twisted in horror. She went to your job. I stood up abruptly. Sarah had just parked her car out front. Before opening the door, I looked at Alex. Look at that. This is the fragility you've been protecting for 10 years. I got in the car, and we left. This time, Alex had absolutely no right to stop me. When I arrived at the maternity clinic, Valerie was on the second floor. She had crashed a prenatal CPR and first aid class. There were a dozen pregnant women sitting on mats with CPR dummies and first aid kits. Valerie was sobbing uncontrollably. I just want her to listen to me. Why is everyone blaming me? If Alex paid attention to me, it's because we've been friends since childhood. I never wanted to break up anyone's family. She spoke in a pitiful tone, making sure everyone heard her. Nancy was trying to stop her. Miss Valerie Lucy is on medical leave and isn't working today. If you want to talk to her, call her, but do not interrupt the class. Valerie shook her head dramatically. She blocked me, and Alex won't even look at me because of her. I don't know what I did that was so wrong. The pregnant women were whispering among themselves. I walked up the stairs holding onto the railing. When someone saw me, the crowd parted. Nancy rushed over to hold me up. Lucy, what are you doing here? You should be on bed rest. If someone puts on a play in my workplace, I have to come clean up the stage, I said loudly. Valerie whipped around. Her eyes were swollen from crying. Lucy, I didn't want to cause a scene. I just wanted to ask you why you want to take Alex away from me. Because of you, he won't answer my calls. I looked her up and down. Valerie, I think you've got your concepts mixed up. I am the one walking away from Alex. I'm not taking him from you. I'm throwing him at you. She was stunned. The entire room went quiet. I walked into the classroom and picked up a dry erase marker from the whiteboard. Ladies, today, we had scheduled the confined spaces first aid lesson. What a coincidence! Someone brought us a real-life case study. Nancy froze. Lucy. I gave her a reassuring look. I wrote on the board. Confined space, pregnant woman, elderly man, child, person with emotional instability. I turned to the class. If you are trapped in an unventilated elevator for 7 hours with limited oxygen, who gets priority access to the air vent? A pregnant woman raised her hand. The elderly man, the child, and the pregnant woman. Exactly, I nodded. Not the person crying the loudest. Valerie went pale. What are you implying? Rule number 1, do not scream, conserve energy, and avoid physical altercations, I continued. Second point, what is the most dangerous element in a confined space? Another woman answered. Panic. Correct. Panic accelerates everyone's oxygen consumption and steals survival opportunities from those in critical medical danger. Valerie ran toward me and tried to snatch the marker out of my hand. You're talking about me, aren't you? She grabbed my arm. Let go of me, I ordered. She didn't. Why do you want to destroy me? You know I have PTSD. You know I'm terrified of the dark and lose control. I can understand losing control. I looked up. What I don't understand is shoving a pregnant woman when you lose control. And I definitely don't understand compulsive lying. At that moment, someone stood up from the back of the class. I'm a witness. It was a woman with a massive belly. I recognized her. It was Claire, the mother of the little boy from the elevator. She was there for the class, sitting in the back with a mask on. She pulled her mask down and glared at Valerie. That day in the elevator, Lucy protected all of us. You said you couldn't breathe, and Lucy dug through your purse for your pills. You didn't have a rescue inhaler, nothing. And you still grabbed her arm to steal her spot. My son wouldn't stop crying. And she gave him her own jacket while she sat in the worst corner of that elevator. The classroom maintained a graveyard silence. Claire's eyes grew red. When the doors opened, I saw it too. That firefighter grabbed you and ran out without looking at anyone else. Lucy was slumped against the wall, pale as a ghost. Valerie shrieked. You're all taking her side just because she's pregnant. Claire let out a sarcastic laugh. We're not taking her side because she's pregnant. We're taking her side because she's telling the truth. Nancy pulled out the visitor log. Miss Valerie, you have barged into a private medical facility without an appointment, disturbing patients and staff. We have already notified security. That was when Valerie truly panicked. She turned to run, but she saw Alex standing in the stairwell. I didn't know how long he had been there. His face was dark, shadowy. Valerie saw him as her lifeline and ran to hug him. Alex, listen to me. I came to talk, but they all ganged up on me. I didn't want Lucy to misunderstand you. Alex looked at her. This time he didn't open his arms to catch her. Valerie, why did you come here to apologize? Does it require putting on a crying spectacle in front of dozens of pregnant women at her workplace to apologize? Alex's voice was low but freezing. It's always been like this. Every time you said you were scared that you couldn't take it anymore, it was just an excuse to make me run and save you. Valerie's tears poured down like a flood. Now you don't trust me because of her. Alex looked at her, and in his eyes, for the very first time, there was not a single drop of pity. It's not because of her. It's because I finally see you for who you are. The color completely drained from Valerie's face. Suddenly, she whipped around toward me, her gaze dripping with venom. Lucy, are you happy now? You have your baby, you had your marriage, and now everyone pities you. But I've lost everything. I stared hard at her. If you've lost everything, it wasn't my doing. It was because you spent your life trying to steal from others, and you finally realized that stolen things slip right through your fingers. The security guard arrived and hauled Valerie away. She resisted screaming Alex's name. This time, Alex stood like a statue, not moving a muscle. The crowd began to disperse. Nancy helped me sit down. Alex walked to the door of the classroom, his voice tight. Lucy, I'm sorry. I didn't think she would come here. There are a lot of things you never thought about, I replied. His face crumbled. I will handle her, he swore. I looked at the words I'd written on the whiteboard, child, pregnant woman, unstable person. You should have handled her a long time ago, I said. He fell silent. I pulled some papers from my purse and handed them to Sarah, who passed them to Alex. Reading the title of the folder, his fingers froze. It was an official grievance report. And the complaint wasn't against Valerie. It was against him. Alex looked up in disbelief. Lucy, you're filing a formal CFD complaint against me. You are my husband, I told him, and because of that I found 1,000 excuses to forgive you for years. But you were also the incident commander of that rescue. That day, the person you denied timely aid to wasn't just your wife. It was a pregnant civilian and an unborn baby. The blood drained from his face little by little. I continued, you don't need to handle Valerie. Handle yourself. After I filed the formal complaint, Alex stopped harassing me. He cooperated with internal investigations and underwent psychological evaluations and protocol retraining. Every now and then, Mark would text me, telling me Alex had requested a voluntary transfer to equipment maintenance and administrative desk duty at the firehouse. He told me Lieutenant Davis was like a ghost of his former self. I read those messages and didn't reply. His changes were his own, not mine. The thing I urgently needed to process was the divorce. The day we went to family court, it was bright and sunny out. Sarah went with me. Alex had already arrived at the mediation room. He wore a simple black jacket and had the divorce settlement agreement sitting in front of him. Seeing me walk in, he stood up instinctively, but forced himself to sit back down. The mediator was a middle-aged woman with a calming voice. Please take this slowly, Mrs. Miller. Sometimes pregnancy alters emotions. Mr. Davis shows a clear willingness to make amends. A divorce isn't trivial, especially with a child on the way. I didn't interrupt her. I waited until she finished and replied, I am completely calm and rational. The mediator looked at Alex. He said in a very hoarse voice, I do not want a divorce. It was expected. I opened the settlement agreement. The house was yours before we married. I'm not asking for it. The car is in your name. I'm not asking for it. Joint savings will be split 50/50. I will submit the bank statements. Child support will be calculated based on standard state guidelines once the baby is born. As for the medical expenses of the pregnancy, I ask that you assume 50% as required by law. Alex let out a bitter laugh. You're so calculating. You planned to leave me a long time ago, didn't you? I didn't look him in the eye. You taught me how to do it step by step. Pain surfaced in his gaze. The mediator asked Mr. Davis, why do you refuse to sign? There was a long silence before he answered. Because I still love her. I felt a sting, but not of pity. It was pure sarcasm. I asked him, you say you love me. Then why did you always come running whenever Valerie called? He opened his mouth. I thought it was my responsibility. You say you love me. Then why during my first 4D ultrasound were you at the airport picking her up? You say you love me, but when I was hospitalized throwing up from pregnancy complications, you were fixing the plumbing at her apartment. I paused. Alex, you say you love me, But when the doors of that damn elevator opened, you didn't even deign to look at me. When I finished speaking, Alex was left completely speechless. The silence in the mediation room was suffocating. The mediator no longer tried to convince us of anything. I lowered my head and signed the last page of the agreement. The sound of the pen scratching against the paper was clean and swift. I capped the pen and placed it in front of Alex. Your turn. He stared at the pen like it was a knife. If I sign, it really is over. Even if you don't sign, it's already over, I replied. You're just dragging out the bureaucracy. Alex's eyes turned bloodshot. Lucy. That day, I really didn't mean to leave you behind. When I saw Valerie crying, my body reacted before my brain. I know it's a terrible excuse, but it was instinct. Thank you for your honesty, I nodded. He looked stunned. Your instinct chose her. And my reason chose to leave you. I'd say that's fair. His hand shook. He picked up the pen, but he couldn't bring himself to sign. The mediator suggested, Mr. Davis, if you cannot make a decision today, we can postpone the signing to another session. That's fine with me, I said. I wasn't going to force him to sign right then and there because I was no longer in any rush. I knew this divorce was going through no matter what. Leaving the courthouse, I had an appointment for my final prenatal ultrasound. Alex followed me from several yards away. He didn't approach. He just watched me stand in line, pay the copay, get my blood drawn, and enter the monitoring room. He had missed all of that countless times in the past. Today, finally, he watched it from beginning to end. Outside the monitoring room, he stood listening to the powerful, rhythmic heartbeat of the baby echoing through the door. Thump, thump, thump. Alex's tears fell uncontrollably. A nurse saw him and offered him a tissue. Sir, don't cry. You're going to pass your stress onto the pregnant mother. I heard the nurse from inside and couldn't help but smile ironically. Wow. So now he was the stress factor for the pregnant mother. The results were excellent. The doctor told me my recovery had been miraculous, but to avoid toxic people at all costs. Alex was standing off to the side. The doctor didn't know who he was, but the sentence was a direct slap in the face to him. I gathered my reports, thanked the doctor, and walked out. I'll drive you home, Alex whispered. No, Sarah is waiting for me downstairs, I said. He nodded, but he didn't move. Lucy, can I touch your belly just once? I stopped. The request wasn't unreasonable, but I looked at his hand and suddenly remembered the exact instant the elevator doors opened. So I said no. The little light remaining in his eyes completely extinguished. I understand. That night I received a long text from Valerie. She said Alex wasn't speaking to her anymore, that everyone at the firehouse despised her, and that because of her stunt at the maternity clinic, the PR firm she worked for a job she got through Alex's connections had fired her. She said she didn't want to live anymore, and that if I had an ounce of human decency, I should tell Alex she wasn't to blame for the elevator incident. I took a screenshot and sent it to Sarah. Don't even reply, she advised. I didn't. But Valerie didn't give up. Lucy, don't think you've won. If Alex won't sign the divorce, it's because he still carries me in his heart. He only pities you because of the kid. That sentence made me laugh out loud. She still believed Alex's love was a trophy of war. The next day, I received a notification from the fire department. A final disciplinary hearing was scheduled for Friday. Representatives from the department store, the victims, and CFD top brass would be there. Mark texted me, Lucy, the brass wants you there, but if you're not up to it, don't force yourself. I'll go, I replied. There were things I needed to hear in person and knots that needed to be untied publicly. That day I wore a long beige maternity dress. Sarah told me, you don't look like someone going to war. I rubbed my belly. I'm not going to war. I'm going to close a chapter. The hearing took place in the main auditorium of the fire headquarters. There was no press, but the families of the trapped victims, the chiefs, and the department store owners were present. Alex was in the front row. He wore his Class A dress uniform perfectly, pressed his back straighter than ever. But I knew he wasn't there to receive a medal. He was there to admit guilt. The battalion chief spoke first. Regarding the elevator rescue on May 7th, it has been confirmed that although extraction was completed, there was gross negligence in medical triage and prioritization. The incident commander has been removed from frontline duty pending evaluation. A murmur rippled through the auditorium. Alex stepped forward. His gaze searched for me in the crowd. He met my eyes for a second, then looked away. I am Lieutenant Alex Davis, incident commander of the primary response unit that day. His voice was firm but betrayed a restrained tension. Upon breaching the elevator, I failed to apply standard medical triage protocols based on severity. I allowed personal biases and subjective perceptions to dictate my actions, prioritizing the evacuation of Miss Valerie, who had minor injuries. This resulted in a critical delay in care for Mrs. Lucy Miller, who was in the advanced stages of pregnancy. When he said my name, his voice audibly cracked. This was not a professional judgment call. It was gross negligence. I accept any disciplinary action and I sincerely apologize to all the victims involved. He bowed slightly. The silence was total. Valerie was there too. She was hiding in the very back row wearing a baseball cap and a mask terrified someone would recognize her. But the more she hid, the more she stood out. The department store owners also apologized, admitting they had ignored 2 maintenance tickets about the elevator failing in the days prior. I remembered the delivery guy saying he almost got stuck the day before. Those tickets weren't infallible security cameras. They were small warning signs that someone decided to ignore. The entire chain of events was projected onto the screen: maintenance logs, 911, calls, hospital records, witness statements, and the pages from my notepad. Seeing that crumpled piece of paper projected on a massive screen, no one could speak. It screamed louder than any speech. Mark also spoke as a responder. He seemed a little nervous, but he spoke clearly. When I entered the elevator, Mrs. Miller was already semi-conscious. Before we secured her, she placed her wedding ring into my hand. People started whispering. Alex stood on the stage rigid as ice. This is a personal matter that shouldn't be in the official record, but I want to state it because it proved to me that every small decision we make in a hot zone can destroy someone's life forever. Mark paused dramatically. She told me, "Tell him my baby, and I won't be waiting for him anymore." The silence was devastating. Alex was trembling for everyone to see. He didn't turn to look at me, but I saw his fists clench so tightly his knuckles popped before going completely slack in defeat. Suddenly, Valerie exploded from the back of the room. "That's not true." Everyone turned toward her. Valerie couldn't handle the pressure and ran toward the front. "Why is everyone blaming me? I was trapped too. I had a right to be scared. If Alex saved me first, that was his decision. I am not to blame for any of this." Alex looked at her with an icy coldness, as if staring at a total stranger. "You're right. It was my decision, and that's why I am standing here taking the punishment. But shoving a pregnant woman in the elevator, faking an asthma attack, and then harassing her at the hospital and her workplace, those were your decisions." Valerie's face lost all color. "Are you willing to publicly crucify me because of her?" I finally spoke up. "Valerie." I stood up, leaning on Sarah. Valerie glared at me. "Nobody wants to publicly crucify you. We are just demanding that you take responsibility for the things you did all on your own." She looked at me with visceral hatred. "You took Alex from me. What more do you want?" I chuckled. "I didn't take anyone from you. And right now, I don't want him back either." Alex's face crumpled. I addressed the CFD brass. "I didn't come here today to revel in anyone's apologies or to destroy my ex-husband. I only came to ensure that in the future, when a pregnant woman, an elderly man, and a child are trapped in an emergency, they are not left for dead, simply because someone else happens to be screaming louder." "Damn straight," someone muttered in the audience. Claire, the mother of the boy, stood up holding her son's hand. "I want to say something too. If it weren't for Mrs. Miller that day, my son wouldn't have made it out alive. From now on, please teach your firefighters that the person making the least noise isn't always the one in the least danger." A timid applause began, which quickly swelled into a deafening roar. I didn't cry. I had shed all my tears in that elevator. At the end of the hearing, Alex was officially suspended without pay for 3 months. His return to active duty would depend on future psychological and protocol evaluations. Valerie was formally fired from her company for scandalous public conduct following the altercation at my workplace. She left crying her eyes out. This time, nobody chased after her. Alex approached me. He still had the ring in his hands. "Lucy, about the divorce settlement. Talk to Sarah," I told him. He shook his head. "I'm going to sign it." I looked at him. His eyes were bloodshot, but his expression was one of absolute calm. "I know I can't hold on to you anymore. I didn't say anything." He placed the ring inside a small, transparent zip-top bag. It was one of the evidence bags rescue teams use to store the personal effects of accident victims. On the paper label, he had written, "Wedding ring. Quantity 1. Pending return." He held it out to me. "I don't know what to do with it." I didn't take it. He looked confused. "Keep it in the firehouse incident archive," I said. "It belongs to that accident, and it belongs to the past." Alex's tears fell silently. He whispered, "I really did lose you." "No, Alex. You lost me the exact second the elevator doors opened and you left me behind." He couldn't manage a single word after that. The divorce was finalized on a Monday. The county courthouse was packed. There were people arguing, people crying, and people sitting in silence. Alex and I were sitting in the same row of benches with one empty seat between us. He had the signed papers in his hands and was picking at the edges with his thumbnail. I didn't rush him. At that moment, I felt absolute peace. When the clerk called our names, Alex stood up clumsily. He turned to look at me, as if asking one final silent question. I stood up, supporting my belly, and gave him no answer. The process with the clerk was quick. We submitted our IDs, confirmed our intent on the record, and provided our signatures on the final decree. They handed us 2 file-stamped copies, one for him, one for me. The clerk said, "Your filing is complete." Alex stared at those words on the paper, his eyes red. When we stepped outside, the sun was blinding. He walked behind me and suddenly called out, "Mrs. Miller." I stopped. How strange it was to hear him call me by my maiden name. I turned around. He stood at the bottom of the steps, looking as if his soul had been scooped out. "Can I go to the last ultrasound before the birth?" "Just the last one." I looked at him steadily. He seemed to have finally realized that there was nothing left of him in my life. "That's not necessary," I told him. He smiled with immense sadness. "You're still just as blunt." "Beating around the bush only hurts more," I replied. He nodded, head bowed. "You'll let me know when the baby is born." I paused for a second. The wind blew, and the divorce decree in my hands offered a strange, comforting warmth. "I will comply with the law and medical ethics. I will inform you of what you need to know as the father. But Alex, please don't try to get close to me using your role as a father." The final flicker of light in his eyes extinguished completely. "I understand." I saw Sarah pull up in her car. Before I got in, Alex suddenly called out, "Lucy, I have a safe delivery." I nodded. "And you. I hope from now on you learn how to truly save people. Not the way you saved Valerie. Not running towards someone out of pure guilt or instinct, but truly looking at who actually needs saving." After we separated, the days passed peacefully. Martha cooked delicious meals every day. Sarah came over twice a week, loaded with fruit and the most absurd gossip, making me laugh until my sides hurt. Nancy, my coworker, sent me the clinic's course materials so I could work remotely from home. Claire also visited every now and then with her son. "My boy still remembers that the auntie from the elevator was the bravest one of all," Claire would say. I'd laugh and ruffle the kid's hair. Auntie wasn't brave. We all pitched in to get out of there. At 30 weeks pregnant, I moved to a slightly larger apartment. It wasn't a palace, but it had a nice living room, a balcony, plenty of natural light, and was close to a park and a good hospital. I placed the baby crib by the large bay window and hand-washed her tiny clothes piece by piece. Hanging them on the balcony, the wind caught them like little celebration pennants. Brenda came to see me once. She didn't pound on the door like a maniac. She stayed downstairs in the lobby and sent me a text. "Lucy, I admit I was out of line last time, but please let Alex see the child when she is born. He is completely devastated." I replied, "Mrs. Davis, please communicate through my lawyer." She insisted, "Are you really that cold-hearted?" I didn't answer again. Cold, I didn't see it that way. I simply felt that I had finally taken back control of my own life. Valerie also sent me a text sometime later. She said she was moving out of Chicago. "Lucy Miller, you won." I read those 4 words and immediately deleted the message. I hadn't won against Valerie because I never saw her as a rival. The person I had truly won the battle against was the Lucy of the past, that woman who sacrificed herself 1,000 times and swallowed 1,000 excuses just to beg for crumbs of attention. Alex didn't interfere in my private life again. He asked about the baby through Sarah, but always very respectfully. I heard that 3 months later, he returned to active duty, but he didn't get his command back. He started from the bottom, running drills with the rookies. Mark told me Lieutenant Davis has a phrase he repeats during every training drill. Now, in a rescue, don't let the screaming fool you. The one who is the quietest is usually the one in the most danger. Hearing that, I smiled faintly. If those words meant that in the future, rescue teams would find a pregnant woman in distress in time, then those 7 hours of darkness hadn't been entirely in vain. My daughter was born on a rainy autumn morning. Before they wheeled me into the delivery room, Sarah held my hand and Martha cried next to her from pure nerves. I was drenched in sweat from the contractions. And suddenly, I remembered that elevator. I remembered myself leaning against that freezing wall, hugging my belly and whispering, "Hold on a little longer, my love." And we had made it. When the sharp cry of the baby echoed in the room, I cried too. The OBGYN placed that tiny little person on my chest. It was a girl. She was perfectly healthy and had strong lungs. I looked at her wrinkled little face and couldn't stop crying. I whispered to her, "Hello, Serena. Welcome to the world. I named her Serena so that in the midst of danger, she would know how to stay calm, discern the truth in people, and enjoy a life of peace. Alex found out about the birth the next day. Sarah kept her word and notified him. He didn't come rushing to the hospital to make a scene. Instead, he asked Mark to deliver a massive bouquet of flowers and a generous financial gift for the baby. The card read, "Lucy, thank you for bringing her safely into this world. I will maintain my boundaries just as you asked, but I will fulfill my duty as a father, and I will never forget what I lost." I read the card, placed the bouquet on the nightstand, and handed the money to Sarah so she could log it officially. I didn't feel love, nor did I feel hate. Some people are simply better left in the past. Just like that wedding ring sitting in the incident archive of a Chicago firehouse, he was now just the memory of an accident that I managed to survive.